Hey everybody, my name is Michael Griffo, and I am an agent at ICM Partners, one of the biggest talent agencies in the world. And today, Camp Broadway at this stage and Streamable Learning are putting us all together. And I am going to be speaking with one of my clients, who is a sound designer, Miles Polaski, who has worked all across the country. And most notably, he is working on a new pre-Broadway musical, The Wanderer, that is going to start. It was supposed to be a paper mill now, I think, or like in a couple weeks. But because of the state that we're all in, it is now going to be next year, and then hopefully we'll be on Broadway in the 21, maybe 22 season. So, hey, Miles, how are you?
I'm doing great, Michael. How's it going?
Doing very well, doing very well. So, we are going to chat today about your background, your career. Miles is not only a sound designer, but he's also a musical composer. Some sound designers do both, some only do one. So, Miles, to start things off, what I'd like to do is, because a lot of our listeners are in high school, maybe grammar school, they're teachers as well. Let's talk about your educational trajectory. Were there any classes that you focused on in school that helped you decide to be a sound designer, composer, or was that all extracurricular activity that brought you here?
Yeah, wow. Great question.
That's a big question. We can
Little
whittle it
open-ended
down.
too. Yeah. My first exposure to theater was right around when I was in middle school, seventh, eighth grade, perhaps.
Mm-hmm.
He had moved. My dad had been in the Air Force, and when he retired, we moved from Arkansas, where I had grown up, to Florida. And when I moved there, that was over a summer, and my mom and dad were trying to find activities for my brother and I to do, and they enrolled us in just a community theater program with one of the local high schools. And so that summer was my first exposure to theater, and it was a lot of really great games that we would play. And I just kind of liked that creativity and getting to meet people by doing all of that.
Before that, it's funny, did you have any idea what theater was?
I don't think so. I mean, I remember when I was in elementary school, doing like little school play thing, but I don't know
Right.
if I understood, that I certainly didn't understand the history of theater and where it all came
Right.
from and any of that. But yeah, as a playful thing to do, but I didn't realize there was something larger out there until that moment. Yeah.
Cool. So when you got there, take us through, you had said you had just moved, you're in this little playhouse thing. What was it about working there, being exposed to this new thing? Was it an immediate recognition, oh, I love this, I gotta do it? Or was it a little more gradual?
I enjoyed it right away. I really liked the people I started to meet, and I loved playing these theater games, the call and response games.
Uh-huh.
Just the basics of what looking back on it was sort of the foundation of understanding how to tell a story, and the basic tools that you need, which aren't much to put on a story and to tell a drama or a comedy. You really don't need a whole lot.
You don't. It can be very simple.
Yeah. And yeah, I just really liked it right away. It was my in into a whole new set of friends. I had never moved before. And so I was feeling a little lost in the people I met there. That was the big value, and being able to fun with them doing the theater stuff was just kind of on top. It was
Right.
really, yeah.
Well, there's nothing like a theater community. We all know that.
Yeah.
So when you went into high school, a little bit older, where did was music always sort of along with theater? When did the love for that come in?
Music, I remember being much younger and my parents bought me a Casio keyboard for Christmas one year. And I had no music books or anything, but it had this function on the Casio keyboard where you could flip a switch and it turned it into chord mode. So if I held
Yes.
down a C, it would play a C major chord for me. And
Cool.
after a while, I became a game. Well, how do they make that? So I would turn the switch off and try and figure out what keys were being pressed
Oh,
on
cool.
the Casio keyboard, and that's how I learned to play major chords.
Did you have like a disco button on yours or a bossa nova?
It was bossa nova, yeah, absolutely, yeah, waltz, yeah.
Yes, because I think we all had one of those. Yes.
Yeah, but being such an inexpensive tool, it kind of taught me really, really, really basic music theory that making a chord can make it sound full and rich, and this is how you make one.
Oh, very interesting.
Yeah.
Very.
But
so that's the first tip. Everybody get a Casio keyboard.
Yeah.
Or something, whatever they have now.
On your app. Yeah.
Do they have an equivalent now that you know of?
Oh, I'm on your phones. If you've got a phone or a tablet at home, you can find little keyboard apps very easily. I'm sure of it. And
really.
And I'm sure you can even find tools on your phone that would even tell you how to play the thing more than flipping a switch like I did. So.
Oh wow.
Yeah. No, there's great music tools out there to teach you right on your phone easily. I'm sure of it.
I still have trouble finding the flashlight mode on my phone. So, well, that's good advice. Very good advice. So how did you, because you're incredibly technical as well as creative, and we'll get into that, a little bit of how they both work separately and jointly. But first, were there any classes in high school that you took that either addressed, I guess maybe music theory, if they had that? They didn't have that in my school. Or did you take any of those classes elsewhere? Did you learn, did you have a private piano teacher or something?
Oh, wow. I wish. No, my first exposure to learning music formally was middle school. So after I'd gone through that move to Florida, and I had gone through that summer stock with the community theater, got enrolled at middle school in Florida and began to learn how to play the trumpet. And that's where I started to learn, about scales and incidentals and all of the notations on the page. I've since forgot 50% of what I've learned, but enough to retain, to what I can be able to do today. But yeah, learning that music theory there was, I didn't realize it at the time, but it really set the framework for, all of my musical knowledge now.
Wow. Well, that's really impressive. That's something you learned there that you kind of take for granted. I mean, I was in the band. I know nothing. I was pretty much there to play some French.
French horn?
It begins with an M. It's like an inverted French horn.
Oh, I don't know.
I'll figure it out. But I was no good. I was terrible, which is fine. But how interesting that something so available to most everyone really could be the foundation, which is great.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's, what you learn in the early days is just, if you have a basic understanding of even that, then, as you grow older and get more experience and different points of view about learning about music or theater or whatever it is, it really, all that knowledge just builds on itself in a beautiful way.
Yes. Abigail from I don't know where, maybe Arkansas, I'm going to say that. It's a mellophone. The mellophone. Okay. That's what I played. From Alabama. Abigail from Alabama. Have you ever heard of a mellophone?
I don't know that I have, no.
Yeah. It goes like that. It was very weird. I was terrible. They needed somebody. I knew the people. I loved all my friends in it. So it was great. So when did your worlds merge? When did theater and music sort of merge together?
For me, it wasn't until I got into college and realized that so in college, I had a very well-rounded theater program. I studied initially.
And where did you go?
Flagler College. It's located in St. Augustine, Florida, which is just south of Jacksonville. And it was, I liked that program there because it was very well-rounded. It wasn't just, I had always participated in theater more as an actor and went to college for that reason. But, you know, we learned about set design and technical theater, costuming, and some of the basic construction methods that are used.
Right.
And at least at my program at that time, I noticed there was a gap. We needed sound content for the shows that we were making for our senior thesis projects, or just for fun extracurricular activities and participating in theater at the college program. So during my senior projects, I produced a sound design for a play that I directed. And that was probably the first time when I took one skill set, the sounds that I had sort of been learning about kind of sporadically and secondhand, and applied it to something that I had really been studying, which is just acting and the art of storytelling and theater in general. Yeah.
So yeah, that's very important because you keep mentioning storytelling, which I think is really important. But what I always find when it comes to design, people know sets and costumes because you can see them. They know projections because you can see them. It's pretty easy. Lighting design gets a little funky because it's one of those things where you don't notice it unless it's really good or really bad. You know, when it's doing its job and supporting the text, you may not get it. And with sound design, people probably don't know everything that encompasses sound design, unless there happens to be, it's a very sound heavy show. So take us through a little bit of what constitutes sound design in a play or a musical, other than, you know, sound effects, or how do you enhance it, the microphones, body mics and stuff. Speak to that if you could.
Sure. Yeah. Sound design is has a huge responsibility. In a nutshell, as a sound designer, we're really responsible for everything, or at least considering everything that an audience member is going to hear during the production, and how that lends itself or doesn't lend itself to the production. So a lot of the things you talked about, like we need to pick out what kind of microphone the actor is going to wear, where on their body is it going to be placed. Sometimes we need to have conversations with costume designers because the actor may be wearing a hat, or if you've ever seen production photos or ever seen The Lion King, all of these beautiful masks, and trying to figure out where a microphone is going to go in there, a large conversation needs to be had about that. We have conversations with the director from the get-go about, you know, what they envision, and we try and make sure that every choice that we make about sound is supporting that. And a lot, so that can sometimes just have to do stylistically with the type of music you're playing, and then all of the qualities that are associated with it. It can really get down to, like, even just considering the air conditioner in the room with you. There's often been conversations that we've had, or a light fixture. I had did a production at in Louisville, the Louisville theater there, and
Humana Festival.
No, I'm sorry, not Louisville. I did a production
somewhere. You did a production somewhere.
They all blend in with one another after a while. But the spotlight they were using had a big fan on it, and it was making this whirring noise, and it's a little distracting. So even just having conversations about very, you know, run-of-the-mill things sometimes happen. and we have to solve
You
those.
sometimes hear that buzz and you're like, where's it coming from?
Right. And that can distract you from a story. So
Very distracting.
anything that might distract you, we try and consider that alongside of all of the artistic choices that we make about, even where, if we've got a band on stage with the Wanderer, a big conversation we're having, the Wanderer right now is, they really want the bands, because it's all about rock and roll music in the late 50s.
From the 50s, right?
Right.
50s, 60s?
50s, early 60s. It encompasses quite and even some of the music that he wrote in the 80s.
Am I losing my mind? Is it Dion and the Belmonts? That's
correct. Yep.
Yeah. So you guys have no idea who it is. Google it. It's a 1950s band, early 60s, Dion and the Belmonts. It's early rock and roll pioneer.
It's great stuff, and I wouldn't be surprised if many of you have heard it in passing and not realized that you heard a Dion song.
Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
It's great music, and because it was the first time we're seeing a live band play rock and roll music in the 50s, we want to have that same experience for our audience. We want to see an audience on stage. And so where do we put the bands? The drummer takes up a lot of room, and can the set designer accommodate that? Can the blocking accommodate having a full drum set on stage? These are
Broadway stages, I don't know how, Paper Mill isn't that big. Broadway stages are not wide.
That's correct.
They're really not. Your high school, if you have a nice theater at your high school, it's probably bigger than a Broadway stage.
Yes, that's actually a really good point. Those auditoriums in high schools can often be very, very wide.
They're huge. Yeah.
And space is very valuable real estate in a Broadway house.
Yes. Quick question. Who makes the decision? Because I do find sometimes those mics that come on the face, I find them distracting because you always see the piece of tape if you're close enough. And then you get the big ones like in the rock musicals, I guess, like Rent started it, where it's almost like the Madonna mic.
Yes.
Where it comes here. What's the trend now? Is there a trend?
I don't know if there's a greater trend. I've always been an advocate of hearing and not seeing anything associated with the sound system. So I personally don't like to see a microphone either, but the real conversation needs to be had about, so the choices like that are often made because of a couple of reasons. One is, how loud do you want the music to be for your audience?
So if you want loud music, where do you put a body mic?
You want to have that microphone as close to the source as possible. If you want to have a really loud musical, you want to make sure it's very close to the source.
Makes sense.
The reason being is that the microphone doesn't pick up just what's right here. It can pick up everything that's around it. So if you've got a lot of sound coming in from all angles, and it's fairly present, you want to make sure that the source is coming from as close to the mic as possible. Now, for more classical style musicals like Oklahoma or Bye Bye Birdie, or very classically styled musical like Guys and Dolls, the way that music was written was to allow room for the voice through the instrumentation. So if you listen carefully, you go back and listen to Broadway recordings, when a voice is about to come in, all the horns go away.
Oh, wow.
To make sure that voice is going to be the thing that's heard. And they also understood that how the band was going to play. It was going to be a very live experience. You're going to have a real band in a pit, maybe modestly mic'd, if at all. So they know if the treatment of the music in this space is going to be light, then the microphone can kind of disappear and we can put it more in the hairline. But if you're going to see something like a musical based on the music of Green Day, or Schoolhouse Rocks, or something like this, then it becomes more important to make sure that microphone is close to the source.
Got it. Interesting. I never thought about that. So go back and listen to some old recordings. I'm sure you can find them. But I'm going to do that too, because I've always wondering, like Ethel Merman didn't have a microphone. Like she wasn't body mic'd, right?
Yeah,
Back in the
back in the 70s, very few were, and if there was a microphone present, it was almost always on your lead.
Interesting. So it's really important and this is for the students, when you're listening to Wicked and Rent and every other Hamilton, they have the microphones like really close to them. And when you listen to Sound of Music, the original Oklahoma, like you said, Bye Bye Birdie, all of those musicals, they have like floor mics, and that's probably it, right?
Yeah,
if they even had that. Do they have those then?
Productions, they probably would have maybe even not even that for an original.
Crazy.
Yeah.
So that's a really good thing, just to remember the power of the voice back then. It was really trained to be over this music, but now I got to go back and listen to hear how that music dissipates to let the singer have the forefront. Interesting.
Yeah, yeah. And speaking of training, even nowadays, I'm a lot of schools that you'll go to, I hope will teach you to sing as though you're not wearing a microphone. If you're a performer watching this, if there's something that you leave with today and you want to seek out being a musical performer as a vocalist and sing on Broadway one day, never depend on that microphone. It's there to help you, but if you're able to fill a house like your high school auditorium or a Broadway house without the use of the microphone, you're just going to be well ahead of that curve.
Yeah.
And again, I've worked with actors who think that the microphone is going to do the help for them. And I can see the performance kind of take a step back because of that. You know, it's not as strong as it could be if they really got in there and
well, because you're not using, I mean, when you're singing, you're using your body, you know, in a performance. You're not just using this. So if you kind of bring that back, the body, I guess, follows, and then everything else follows that.
It's all connected, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting. So let's now cross over. Oh, actually, this is what I wanted to do. Before we get into your musical composition stuff, briefly tell us, and you've touched upon it a little bit, when you are offered a job, when you're going to work on a new project, as a sound designer, what's the first thing you do?
First thing I do is read the script. I want to.
Everybody says that. Everybody got to read that script.
Yeah, you have to. It's the starting point. It's the whole reason why we're here is because, you know, this is the story on the page that the artistic director or the director wanted to tell.
But how do you read it then as a sound designer? Do you read it any differently? Maybe not the first time.
No, that's a good point. No, it has to. My role as a sound designer starts immediately. It can be difficult sometimes for me to read a play just as in a passive way as an audience member without sort of considering what this would mean for the world of sound and for this particular project. So, oftentimes I'll make notes about is there underscoring, what kind of sound effects are needed? Are there any microphones? If it's not a musical, sometimes microphones aren't needed. What is the style of music we should consider? Imagery.
Oh, hold on one second. So if you're when you see a play, maybe not on Broadway, but regionally, do the actors have body mics?
It depends. Some houses, it's really useful to have them. Some theater companies insist on using them. Some don't. So a bit of a conversation has to happen. Like, well, you know, I'm coming in as a hired gun.
Right. What's your demand? What are your demands?
Yeah. What do you normally do? And then we can kind of have a conversation from there. I worked with the company earlier last year that normally does not use microphones. And I had a conversation about them about actually using them for this production. And sort of had a proposal on why I thought that was a good idea. And we ended up using them. Yeah.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
And that's really great because if they're not if they're not used to using them, they have to rent them. So you're asking them basically to spend more money.
Sometimes, and in this case, thankfully, they already had a stock that we could use for them. But yes, sometimes when I'm proposing, to add something to the sound system that they're not accustomed to having, then yeah, sometimes that also is asking for them to make an investment monetarily, which can sometimes lead to them saying no. So.
It can sometimes, if they don't have the money. So if there are no sound effects, everybody knows what a sound effect is. Do you create those on your computer, or is it sometimes the old-fashioned way, like they used to do in radio dramas, where I don't know, you actually have shoes walking around? Everything is computerized these days, isn't it?
Yeah. And because Hollywood has been producing movies for so long, there's a huge library of sound effects that are out there and available. I'd say 90, maybe 95% of the sound effects that I'd use in any given story have already been recorded for me.
What's the weirdest sound effect you ever had to create?
Oh, that's a good question. Let me think here. I've had to really create strange soundscapes to help us understand what's happening in another part of a space. The great thing about sound from a storytelling thing is that it doesn't have to literally be there in order to represent it through sound. So you may see that they're standing on a street corner at a bus stop, but until you hear the traffic and a fire hydrant down the street and some kids laughing and the birds chirping and a siren in the distance, that you really get a sense of where we are in the world. And the imagery at that point can only tell so much of the story. And that's what I really love about this world of sound design, is that I'm able to take what I'm literally seeing on the stage and enhance that with other details that we couldn't before. On a really nice little granular level, we can paint a picture that's beyond of what you're just seeing. And in order to get to that detail, that's one of the reasons why we look at the video the sound libraries that are available for purchase. If you do like a Google search for sound effects library,
there's probably a lot of free stuff out there, like there are free images, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you can find really fun introductory libraries of landscapes and cityscapes and all sorts of things to kind of get you started if you wanted to play around with that stuff.
A great experiment, I think, for a classroom would be to do a scene with no sound effects whatsoever and no sets. Just do the scene and then do it again with still no set or maybe costumes, but sound effects, and see what the difference is and how it comes to life just with the sound.
Yeah, that could be really interesting. As soon as you started to say that, I imagined actors sort of in a black box and they're just sound lit, and you hear the sounds of underwater, and that right there can do worlds to tell, the people in the audience, this is where we are, and this is how deep it feels, and
how it might change the scene that wasn't even there. That wasn't even a thought. So there you go. So get on that, people.
Yeah. And I've even had actors tell me how sound has informed their performance or their perception of the story. The actors will get together for 2 to 4 weeks and rehearse this thing in kind of a vacuum where they're just under some fluorescent lights and going through the motions of what's going to happen when we get into the rehearsal space, into the theater, the rehearsal space. And as soon as they hear music, and it's much the same reaction that that actors often have when they put on their costume for the first time.
Sure.
Oh, this is who I am, and I'm wearing overalls. Or the sound can have the same profound effect on an actor's performance as much as it can have for an audience.
Yeah, because it's all, like you said, it's all pieces of the storytelling.
Right.
And when it's all working together in with the same goal, then it's really wonderful, because then you're taking the whole story and lifting it up with all of these separate little pieces, which is really fascinating. So because not every sound designer composes music, right?
That's correct. Yeah.
Yeah. So what, other than your love for music stemming with the Casio keyboard, when did you make that transition, that leap?
Yeah, I'm trying to remember what the first production was that I actually composed my own music. It was fairly early in my sound design work that I started using my own compositions. I think originally it was just I was just super curious about doing it and
Right.
what that experience would be like, and what can I get away with? Am I even able to do this?
Can I do it? Yeah, exactly.
As an experiment, and I just liked the kind of control you can have when you know what the music is going to be, or you have control of what you want the music to do.
Right.
So being able to watch some action on stage, and you see kind of the arc of the story that they're trying to tell and the pace that they're telling it. And then you sit back and you think about, okay, well, if I was going to I need to underscore that. So,
Right.
I'm going to pick these instruments, and you can really, really construct something that's going to be just for that, just for this moment.
Right.
And going to fit the nuances and the nooks and crannies of this scene better than you could if you're trying to source this, from pre-recorded material,
Right.
which is it's doable. It can be more difficult sometimes to get everything to line up, or
Sure.
you might have to have a conversation with the director about this moment the actors are taking going really through it really quickly. If they took their time, it might line up to the music, and they go, oh, okay. So it's all a conversation. But as far as getting into composing music for theater as a sound designer, it started off as a curiosity, but then I started to really like the control I could have over a moment and being that much more accurate for what I did.
And that music, it's the underscoring during a scene, perhaps, but it's also transition music from scene to scene. Do they also call that interstitial?
Yeah, interstitial is a word I've heard thrown around. Yes, yeah, transition music. And
like the music at the very beginning of a play.
Right.
A lot of times when you see these Broadway plays, they like to make it look like you're getting more for your ticket price, so they blow it up sometimes with music beforehand, and it doesn't always work because sometimes it just feels like they wanted to make it a little bit longer, create some loud music in the beginning. So in order to fight that, the pre-music beforehand, do you still just look at the script and give it a reason to exist other than it's kind of loud music that's starting us off?
Yeah, I think there needs to be attention paid on what you're trying to do at the beginning of a play. And I usually, this play ended up getting canceled because of what's going on with COVID-19. But one of the conversations I had with the director about how to start the play is, how do you want your audience to feel? What do you want them to know before the play begins?
Right.
And depending on how that director would answer that question could send me down multiple paths on how I wanted to solve it. So they could say, I want them to feel like they know, I want them to feel like they know what's going to happen, or I want them to expect a surprise. And depending on them saying that, I might say, okay, great. Well, this play is about a point in history, so I may pick something that's very historically accurate. and they go, oh, I know about this play because this piece of music tells me that I should know.
Right.
But if
It's like a touchstone.
Yeah, a little touchstone. So yeah, when a play is beginning, and if it's done right, I think that it's used as a conduit between I'm here talking with my friends and family to, okay, now a story is happening. And in that 10 to 30 seconds, the story transitions from I'm talking with my friends to the moment happening on stage. And if I tell that story right, then I've set you up for the first thing that first piece of action that's gonna happen on stage. Right. Yeah.
Yeah, it's very interesting. It's really just like any other piece of design. But before we get far, I want you to show off some of your skills.
Okay.
You do these things called mashups. Give us a little bit and then show us some of your work.
Okay, sounds good. Yeah, I hope this plays through. And when we tested it the other day, it worked pretty well. So
we'll see what happens. But let everybody know what a mashup is first. Like, what are we talking about?
Yeah, so a mashup is when you take you can do with a lot of different kinds of media, but in music is when you take two pieces of music and two different songs, and usually you have an instrumental track or the background music, all the drums, the keyboards, the bass and stuff, and then take another track, and that's usually an a cappella or just the voice of another song. And you blend them together, and it creates a new song out of two existing pieces.
Kind of like a DJ spinning.
Yes, absolutely.
The spinning? That's what I'm spinning. So show us that, and then specifically talk about what they're going to see. I guess it's the frequencies.
Yeah, so let me share my screen with you here, and I can walk you. Share screen. Here we go. So this is an audio workstation. You can see this okay, Michael?
Yep, perfect.
Okay, great. And it's called Ableton Live. And some of you may have heard of a program called Pro Tools or Logic, GarageBand. It's really not that much different. You know, if you know how to use GarageBand, there's a few user interface things that are different between that program and this one, but it's all basically the same. But yeah, you're looking at what's called a waveform here. And this is essentially just kind of a sound's fingerprint, you know, kind of what it looks like if you were, when you graph it out here. And so in this program, what I'm able to do is, for example, I have two different pieces of music here. And like I was saying, one of these is an instrumental, and one of them is an a cappella. And I think you'll recognize this young lady.
She ain't real. She ain't gonna be able to love you like I will. She is a stranger. You and I have history, or don't you remember?
That's Adele. You hear that okay, Michael?
Yeah, and that's just her vocal.
And that's just her voice. Yeah, I'm able to find these online. There's a couple of places I can search for these. You always can't
Where
find
would you search?
But if you search for a cappella, vocal a cappellas, you can find them on YouTube.
Okay.
Is a really quick, easy place to find some of these. Again, you don't always find what you're looking for.
Sure, but you hunt and peck and...
Yeah, and you find some neat stuff.
Stumble upon something.
Yeah, I think if you were interested in digging into more of this, YouTube is where I might start and search for...
Cool.
You could probably find this one, Adele, rumor has it, a cappella. You could probably find this one there. And so with this program, I'm able to line up her tempo. So here you can see her voice here, but I'm able to stretch time. I can move this around on a timeline, which slows and speeds up her voice.
Oh, wow.
Without changing the key. In fact, I can kind of demonstrate that really quickly. I'll play it again and I'll speed up her voice really quickly and notice that the pitch stays the same.
She ain't real. She ain't gonna be able to love you like I will.
Oh, how cool. Because usually when you do that, it gets like a Mickey Mouse.
Right. Yeah, it gets
Oh, wow.
more chipmunky, it gets higher.
Yeah.
And so what that enables me to do is I can now take an instrumental, which I have.
Yeah, add that in now.
Yeah, so this is Stevie Wonder. This is called For Once in My Life. He is amazing.
Oh, sure.
Stevie Wonder is such a good person and musician. I'll just play this by itself real quick so you can hear this instrumental.
I'm sure everybody knows that song.
I hope so. That is such a good.
It's a classic.
Oh my gosh.
Now put them together.
Okay. And the reason this works is of course I've obviously lined up the tempos as I sort of illustrated, and this is where my early education into music sort of made me understand why this works. Is that I've been able to put them in the same key. They're in the same musical key. So all of the notes that Adele is singing are the same notes that Stevie is playing fundamentally anyway, like the same scale on his key.
Right.
So, so this is because of that. This is what you get when you're able to put them together.
She ain't real. She ain't gonna be able to love you like I will. She is a stranger. You and I have history, or don't you remember? Sure, she's got it all. But baby, is that really what you want? So you got your...
It's a lot of fun.
I love it.
Yeah.
Absolutely love it.
Yeah.
So really, I mean, music theory, YouTube, you know, some kind of goofing around, and there you go. You have something like that. So time flies when you're having a great time, but Camp Broadway at this stage, their motto is develop your character. So how do you define character?
Okay.
Whether personally or professionally, you know, when you're working.
Yeah. No, I think when I was thinking about that question, I was thinking about, you know, sitting with my friends and my colleagues, all of my theater people that I think have good character, and I'm thinking about them all in a theater with me. And what I see is a collection of people who know how to act and make choices when things are difficult. Theater, you know, often we might be lacking money. We might be really, really short on time. We may have, you know, come up against something in a rehearsal process where in tech, and we've got, you know, an audience coming in tomorrow and we have a problem to solve. And I think people really develop character in moments like that, when it's really hard to make a decision, and you're limited on all of those resources, but somehow you're able to come up with a choice that that's going to work. And I think, and I think, you know, if you look at, you know, what's happening now in the country, some very strange things happening because of COVID-19, and I think that, you know, there's some people out there having to make some really hard choices right now. And I think if you look at them carefully, you'll see their character as they make these choices. So I think this applies to, you know, all over, but for me in the theater, watching my friends and my colleagues, the people I work with every day, make hard choices is how I've seen and helped develop my own character.
I think that's a great answer, and I think you can apply that to everything, whether you're just in a classroom doing your homework or on the stage working on a project. The one thing that I always tell my clients is you're all good. You have to be able to work in a small room in a limited amount of time with about 10 or so other people. And if you're not willing to do that, and if you can't do it positively and collaboratively, you're not going to get hired again, because it's a very small world. And those choices you make in that room and the way you make those choices, that is your character. I love that, Miles.
Yeah.
Thank
Oh,
you.
thanks. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, thank you so much. And thanks everybody for listening. Camp Broadway Streamable Learning. We will see you next time. Bye-bye.
Thanks for this. It's been wonderful talking to you all. Take care.
Thank you.